Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again at Breaking Boundaries. Today, joining me is Jennifer Boicic, a very good friend of mine, and has known me for about 5-6 years now at this point. Wow. Our paths crossed because we worked in the same company, in the same team, and we just had a meeting of the minds. Like every time we got together, we just sit there and shoot shit for like an hour plus on really random topics. But fast forward, our paths have digressed, moved away, multiple different companies now. But foundationally, there's a big story there in Jennifer's story that I wanted to share with all of you. She's a Latina, comes from a different cultural background, has been through tech, and we want to get as much learnings through her journey that we can potentially take back and potentially take any learnings out of there. And that was the intent of today's session. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Oh, no, it's pleasure is all ours, is what I will say. So I'm going to start again, just like every other session, get to where it all started. Talk about your formative years, your upbringing, your cultural background, and how that created the fabric that is you today.
Wonderful. Yeah, excited to share.
Cool. All right. So all yours. Wherever you want to start.
Okay.
Like talk through your where you were born, your family. I know you're Peruvian as well.
Yeah,
which is awesome.
Start from the beginning.
Yeah, start way from the beginning, and then we'll go into whichever direction this takes us.
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Sacramento, California. So born here in the U.S. My mom immigrated from Lima, Peru in the 80s and had me as a single parent. All of my family is still in Peru. She came here alone and has been in this country alone, raised me on her own. So strong superwoman is what I call her. Mm-hmm. And essentially, when I was 5, started going back to Peru. It was actually my first time meeting my family. Mm-hmm. It was an incredible experience. I remember, I was only 5, but I remember the moment where I got to meet my cousins and my aunts and uncles for the first time. And so fast forward, I went to always Catholic school, private school. My mom always instilled the value of education and really making that sacrifice of not going back to Peru to raise me so that I could have a better future and go to college, get a career in the corporate world. And that's essentially what I did. So went to USC for undergrad, did an engineering program, went straight into tech, and have had a wonderful 14 plus year career in the tech industry, as you mentioned, across different companies, and live here in the Bay Area. I've lived all over California, born and raised in Cali girl for life, probably.
Represent.
And, yeah, exactly. And yeah, absolutely. You know, in terms of values, love my family, education, and really paying it forward and giving it back, which is one of the most important values my mom and my family instilled in me.
And then I remember you saying you were the first in your family to go to college, correct?
Yes. That's exactly right.
So how did that feel?
Wow. I remember graduating in 2007 from USC and having my mom, my tia from Peru fly down, my entire community, because even though most of my family is in Peru, there was an entire Peruvian community that helped. You know, it takes a village to raise a child, right? And that's exactly what it was. It was a village of Peruvians that had adopted me in Sacramento. And so had a whole gang of folks that came down to USC. And I just remember getting my diploma and actually being recognized as a leader at USC, and that kind of pride that my family and friends had for me, knowing the sacrifices that my mom made to get me to where I was at the moment, and all this, the hard work that I put into getting to that point. It was just such a proud moment. Even before that, getting my application of acceptance was like a huge moment. That, you know, those moments like in Inside Out where you have like those little moments that stick in your brain forever. Like the movie, that's exactly what it was for me. I will always remember those moments. And my family in Peru, of course, absolutely proud of what I accomplished then, and just really spearheading what it means to get a higher education, to change your your path moving forward, and your
Hmm.
path in life. And so now my
Hmm.
nieces in Peru are university students in Lima. One is doing engineering as
It's
well. The
awesome.
other one's in psychology. And I feel I've led a good example for them in what they're trying to accomplish in their lives.
That's awesome, because now you're not just paving net new paths, you're also now a role model for others. So that's no
Exactly.
pressure,
Right.
is,
Right.
is what I would say. But being the one who's, let's say, paving that path first, you must have had your fair share of imposter syndrome going through all of that, being the
Right.
only in the room. Talk us through that, how you combated that, and maybe sometimes you don't, right? You're
Yeah.
still you still have it, but how did you get
Mhm.
through the toughest phases there?
No, absolutely. It's definitely, it comes and goes, imposter
Yeah.
syndrome, right? Like I think people may think, oh, it gets better the more years you have under your belt. And that's not necessarily true, because the more you move up in your career, the bigger shoes you have to fill, the more pressure there is. And for me, being the first in my family to have a career in tech, to be in the corporate world, I don't have a lot of examples in my core circle that I could go to for advice or look at. And so imposter syndrome is there. And especially after leaving the same company for 12 years and starting at a new company that moves a lot quicker and didn't know anyone, absolutely imposter syndrome was there. But
Yeah.
it really goes back to uh, what I've really learned is really being okay with failure and being okay with making mistakes. I think I was raised, and maybe a lot of Latinas can relate, of this kind of sense of perfectionism, that everything has to be a certain way, dress a certain way, say things a certain way, especially when you're the only one in the room that looks like you,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
me. It's very hard to not feel imposter syndrome. And it's important to circle back on where you're at and how you got there, right? And have that kind of confidence going into anything that's net new, and have that moment of being courageous and be comfortable being uncomfortable, which is actually one of something an exec used to say that I love, because that's absolutely true.
That is true.
Being okay, being okay with making mistakes and
Hmm.
failures, that's a big one. And then visualizing success. So for me, those moments where I feel like so overwhelmed, I really like to just meditate and visualize me doing what it is I have to do, whether it's a presentation or going into a new role that I didn't expect I would have, or getting promoted, which I recently did, and stepping into those shoes, and really visualizing what success looks like for me, and reminding myself how I got to where I'm at.
Okay. A lot there to unpack.
Yeah.
What are the toughest battles of your career?
Yeah. So definitely credibility, being, as I mentioned, with imposter syndrome, being the only one in the room that looks like me, being a lot of times with an engineering degree going into tech, into a sales engineering role for 90% of the time, maybe even more, was always the only woman,
Hmm.
or especially the only Latina in the
Hmm.
room. And so the challenge has always been getting that credibility of I've gone into meetings with white men, my counterparts, and they think I'm the secretary or I'm not the engineer, basically.
Hmm.
And so coming into a room where no one else looks like you, it's definitely been the challenge. And that's where, like, having advocates and always making sure that, especially as an engineer, like, look, I have my certifications, I know what I'm talking about, like, quickly building that credibility and not taking that into account with how I perform or how I show up. And so that's been one of the biggest challenges for sure in every role, is not having that benefit of the doubt up front and just having to
Hmm.
always prove yourself. I actually remember there was a role in my early on in my career where I was up for promotion, and there was a lot of doubt in among the male leaders about, can she handle it? Will she
Mm.
do a good job? And I remember the only Latino manager that I've actually ever had in my career was in the room and advocated for me and said, of course she could do it. She's an engineer, went to
Yeah.
USC. Like, let's give her that opportunity. She deserves it. She's proven herself. And when that came back to me, I was like, see, this is what it's about, what advocacy is about. But I'm not in that room to be able to do that. And that's where allyship comes into play. But if he wasn't there, maybe I wouldn't have gotten that role or
Yeah.
that promotion. And so credibility is a tough one. And then, yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm glad you brought up the allyship aspect, and again, stating upstanding, because it's hard to do. And then for the first time for allies to do it, you just don't know how to do it right. And I mentioned this in a few other episodes as well, but it's okay to get it wrong. But you will
Mhm.
eventually get it right being an ally,
Yeah,
the more you upstand for the right reasons.
exactly.
Yeah. So no, that I'm glad you shared that. You're doing a lot of work right now in the company you're in. Like literally, I think you built a brand new employee resource organization over the last few months.
Yep.
And that the goal there was to create safe spaces for the right conversations. Tell us more about what that means, the challenges you faced in just building that safe space,
Right.
and also now effectively leading that as well as as a initiative, as an organization, sub-organization within the grander scheme of things.
Right. Absolutely. Previous to coming into this new company, I had always been a leader, participated in ERGs, employee resource groups, and it goes back to how I was recruited into tech. I was part of Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, went to a conference in Denver, went to, the career booth for this company, and then one thing led to another 12-year career later. So so it goes back to my why and why I do this. And when I came over to this new company, I remember my new hire orientation, and I was asking about ERGs and they didn't exist.
Mm.
And granted, this was about a month and a half before the pandemic. And about a few months after we went into shutdown is when we started having these conversations around ERGs, diversity groups, and there was an entire leadership team that was built to stand these up. And one of them was for the Latinx group. And of course, I was super busy at the time, but I signed up and I said, what an incredible opportunity to help build a foundation within this company. It's the first time they're doing ERGs and taking them on. What a great opportunity to stand up what it means for the Latinx community to be here.
Hmm.
And granted, there were plenty of people that within the company that identified as Latinx, but there wasn't a platform for us. And that's where the value of starting the ERG groups came in, and being able to co-lead that effort for the last year and a half has been an incredible journey, because now we have over 550 members, and it's not just folks that identify as Latinx, it's also a bunch of allies. And we've been able to host a ton of activities, not just for fun and social, which is super important, especially during the pandemic when we need that kind of break from all the
Yeah.
recruiting.
From the monotony, yes.
Yes, exactly. And we get great participation in those, but it's also about having the real conversations and those authentic moments where we're bringing in senior leaders to share what biases there are of people like us in the workplace in tech. How do we overcome those biases?
Indeed.
And then that's more from a professional standpoint, but then within our community during the pandemic, gender violence has gone up.
Mm.
And so how do we have those safe conversations in the workplace where we can not only address these issues in a way that benefits others by, one, educating, as well as figuring out what we can do as a community to help and come together. And so it's really been an incredible platform and community that we built to not only give folks a sense of belonging, but make sure that people within the company, no matter early in career or late in career, wherever, whether they're Latinx or not, feel comfortable bringing their authentic selves.
Mm,
And that's really what we strive to do. And with our leadership board, we've done an incredible job in only a year and a half
yeah,
that we've been around as an organization.
yeah. No, this is phenomenal because it's not easy to stand up an employee resource group, and
Right.
and definitely not easy to get it up to 500 people in terms of
Yes.
membership that quick a time. So,
Yeah.
is there a secret sauce there that ended up making that much of an impact?
Right. Yes. Well, secret sauce, a lot of it is showing our passion. I mean, that when we got the board together and we introduced ourselves to our executive sponsors, one of the things that came across was passion. We
Right.
all have our day jobs, right?
Yeah.
But we make the time to
Totally.
commit and make a difference because it's really fulfilling work. And so
Yeah.
one is passion of the team, the leaders that are putting these activities together, that are hearing from the community that we build, what are things that are top of mind, because maybe the things that were more popular before the pandemic have changed during the pandemic. And so we're asking people to take time away from their kids, away from other things going on at home to be part of this community and bring their and participate, right? And so there's got to be an incentive there, something they get out of it. And I think it's really just having those authentic conversations, something that people can learn from and take away from, and allies especially. It's all about education,
Mm,
and figuring out how they can show up for us as a community and together make a difference. And it's also the executive sponsorship is so important. And I always
agreed.
talk about this. If we had a secret sauce, that is a big component of it, because we can only be so successful on our own
Hmm.
without that kind of executive sponsorship of being able to support us in our initiatives, create new ideas, and like think through how to solve some of these problems collectively is so important. We can't do this in a bubble. When it comes to recruiting next gen Latinx talent into tech, into the company, we need that level of visibility and that level of support in order to move the needle and really make a difference. So that's those are the things I would say is being authentic, finding out what your community needs, and having exec sponsorship is really, really important to have a successful ERG and grow from there.
Okay. No, that makes perfect sense, and I think the executive sponsorship piece is it opens up doors to getting things done faster in general,
Exactly.
right? So I completely agree
Yes.
on that part. I mean, what can leaders in corporate America do? This is not switching gears, but necessarily something that I've always pondered on is what can leaders in corporate America do to improve female representation in technical roles? Because you're an engineer, you're coming in,
Right.
and if I was to say diversity as a whole is maybe more challenged in the technology spectrum versus the non-tech roles in general in the companies. So, what can leaders do better?
So there's a lot they can do. Leaders can for sure hold their themselves and hold their company accountable.
Yeah, yeah,
And first of all, companies share out their diversity report. So we know where we're at in terms
yeah.
of women, in terms of diverse candidates or diverse employees within the company. We know where we're at. And what I see is these diversity reports come out and there's very little movement
Hmm.
from one
Hmm.
year to the next. And where leaders can really step in is holding their organizations accountable. For example, when it comes to recruiting, do we have a diverse pipeline? Not
Mm,
only do we have a diverse pipeline, do we have a diverse set of interviewers on the panel? I can name many times when I was a hiring manager where I really was that advocate for a Latinx candidate that was going through our pipeline for a role. And because I was a hiring manager and had hiring decisions, I had a lot of influence on who we put through into those roles. And so we got to make sure we hold the hiring managers, the recruiting teams accountable for not just the pipeline building, but also getting them in the door and
Yeah.
getting them into the company and making sure they're the right fit,
Yeah.
right? Making sure folks are the right fit for the role and have the right skill sets. And so it also goes back to really that, and then for those that are in the company, making sure there's enough resources and visibility and opportunities for people of color, for women of color to go into leadership roles. A
Mhm.
lot of us, like I mentioned, I'm first generation, so I don't have family members that are VPs or SVPs
Yeah.
in corporate America, let alone in tech.
Yeah.
And having resources, career coaches, and all of that in place to be able to make sure women of color stay in these companies and then grow within them is really, really key. And making sure that's important. The company has to value that. It's got to
Yeah.
be one of the core values of every company if we're going to take it seriously.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. I usually tend to bookend most of the sessions with this question, but there's a bookend plus one question as well. The bookend is, what can allies do better? 3 things that allies can do better to promote diversity and inclusion.
Yeah. I actually jotted them down. So hold on. We could edit this out. Yeah. And it's a little bit what I've talked about already. It's one, education. Allies and all of us, actually, we need to educate ourselves more on what are the challenges we face, what are the challenges women of color face when it comes to, for example, today is Latina Equal Pay Day, and it's like 70 cents to, or maybe less to the dollar for, compared to a white male counterpart. And actually I have that stat wrong, hold on, let me see, I don't want you to quote me on that. So today is Latina Equal Pay Day, and it's actually 55 cents to the dollar compared to a white male counterpart.
Wow.
And it's not just one industry, it's across industry. So it's really important to educate ourselves, for allies to educate themselves on what are these gaps and what are these opportunities to make a difference so there is more equality. And then I'd say beyond education, opening doors for others. Like I mentioned, my core why and why I love giving back, because there were a lot of folks that opened doors for me to get me to where I am, and why not pay it forward? And I've actually had opportunities to do that in previous roles, and it's one of the most fulfilling feelings, and making that impact. So open doors for others when you see an opportunity to make a referral, or you see an opportunity to position someone, or fight for them in that room when they're not there, and talking about their promotion, like I mentioned my first manager did for me. Do that, right? Take that opportunity and step up and act on it. And then I'd say for allies, participate in ERGs. ERGs, especially as I mentioned, ours, we are providing this community, and we get these questions all the time from allies: is what more can I do? And so I think just being there and showing up and participating is so important, because it shows your solidarity and being able to act on it. Once you have the education and know where those opportunities are to help, participating in ERG is going to be an incredible effort. And those 3 are what I'd recommend.
Okay. So education,
Opening doors.
sponsorship.
Yep, exactly.
And ensuring that you are also continuously participating, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a close feedback loop to some extent, right? I mean, if you're also participating to educate and then sponsor, so it's actually a very nice close feedback loop there.
Yep.
Yeah. No, thank you. Phenomenal. So this is where the tables turn.
Okay. Wow, that went by fast.
Yeah, and then you get to, this is something I started doing recently, in the last few episodes, but you get to ask the host any question you want, and I will shoot straight. So we'll keep it as real as it gets. So all yours. Any question for me?
Okay. So I love, first of all, how much of an ally you are. I love that
Okay,
you
thank you.
set up this forum. It's wonderful to have these conversations. If you had a magic wand when it came to allyship, what's one thing you would change or want to see?
Ooh, magic wand. Nobody will like me if I say this at work, but minimize the BS is maybe what I would say. Right? Okay, we should all stop talking about diversity and inclusion, to be very honest with you, and just get
Yeah.
shit done.
Right. Exactly. That's my
Right.
motto.
Like get shit done, get to the action.
Yes.
Right? How do you action this? How do you really do things?
Exactly.
Case in point, if you have position, power, privilege, whatever it might be, any of those three, then use it for good, please. Right?
Exactly.
Use it as in, don't just go there and say, I want to be an executive sponsor. Be an executive sponsor that drives action, is what I would say, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of those ERGs that don't have an executive sponsor suddenly have you now.
Yeah.
And they're not used to action, by the way. They're used to talking about what they should do, they've never
Right.
done. So give
Right.
them something to do,
Yeah.
and give them your organization to go experiment on, is maybe what I would say.
Yeah.
The other piece is, the reason I say that from an executive sponsor is because we don't want to do an act of Congress to make something happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I want, my humble opinion, if I want more representation of women in tech in my organization, then foundationally every leader on my team should be mentoring one.
Exactly.
I should be mentoring one as a senior leader. So all of it, right? All my senior architects and engineers should be mentoring one as well, right?
Yep.
So foundationally, succession shouldn't be a unidimensional thing. It should be a multidimensional thing, foundationally, right? It should. The way I always say it to my organization is, you should be mentoring somebody that you choose and somebody who looks very different from you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And that will solve for a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talent pipeline, it'll solve for representation pipelines, it'll solve for so many things. And again, this is not a short play, this is no easy button. This is like, you do this today and you do it regularly for the next 3-5 years, your entire organization will morph into this new thing that you didn't even know existed out there.
Exactly.
You
Yep.
know? The other
and this
piece,
is why we get along so well. Have very similar values.
no, because I'm just tired of people. And the reason I started this podcast, to be honest, is to be able to influence more thought around action, right? Not just around, hey, we all know it's the right thing to do. Okay, I've seen enough metrics to put me to sleep, right? No offense to anybody, but I've seen a lot of metrics. And you know the ecosystem is broken. So fine, what are we going to do about it? And a lot of times, it's not the intent that is wrong. A lot of people have great intent. They do not know how to convert intent to practice and to policy. From policy to practice doesn't happen.
Right. Yep.
So the intent of the podcast is to do that, is like literally like to give, maybe even if one person out of this podcast gets this one little tip to say, hey, maybe all of my leaders in my organization need a succession plan that is exactly like what Umesh is saying. Phenomenal. You have now, I might not directly know this person or this company, but now I've impacted more lives.
Yeah.
Right. And that's exactly the intent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's literally the construct for me, is we need to like get past the PS, get to action. 1, 2, drive accountability, like hands-on accountability.
Yep.
Right? Like make it, don't say it's a priority on a PowerPoint slide, because I've had that a lot. So ditch the PowerPoint slide, shred it actually, and then and actually do it daily.
Exactly.
Flip it. Show it in your action, right? You have a requisition coming in and you don't have a single woman on your resume list, hold it.
Yep.
Hold it till you get one. Start with one.
Yep.
Right. And you can't find it, find a new recruitment team.
That's right. Exactly. Because I'm tired of hearing pipeline problem.
And
there is no pipeline problem, right? There is talent that exists, maybe not from the Ivy League schools that everyone's always recruiting from, but there is plenty of diverse pipeline out there. We just have to change our approach.
Totally. I'm in the Bay Area, and if somebody comes and tells me that there's no diverse pipeline, I'm like, it ain't going to get more diverse than this.
Right. Exactly.
Like I don't know what to tell you. Right. So the third piece, I think, again, the accountability piece is part B. Part C for me is around, we talk about talent foundationally, but we always try to look for the short-term easy button, right? I think more leaders need to stop thinking like, I'm going to solve for a 2-year window because that's how long I'll be in this role.
Right.
Or a 3-year window or a 5-year window. Solve for a decade-long window, right? So for example, if I wanted more Latinx and more African American representation in my company 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I need to be reaching into the education system in my community today.
Yep.
And doing actual CSR work.
And the investments need to be made.
Yes. And like personal, my time investments,
Yeah.
right? That is when the rubber hits the road. That's when shift happens, not when, again, A and B will solve for maybe 2, 3, 5-year windows. Long-term 10-year windows is where I feel community involvement needs to happen from serious leaders who really say, you know, I want to go out there. I want to be here. I want my team to invest here, right? I want them to mentor and coach. Hell, if I have a kid old enough, they should be mentoring and coaching. All of that, right? So think beyond a very single dimension, broaden the aperture, and do all of that is basically my humble opinion. Again, I went on a rant there, thanks to the passion.
Thank you.
But you have the answer at least.
Yeah, thank you. And to add to that, there's so much power in showing that these kids, for example, you're talking about the next generation, there's so much power in showing them what they can be, what they can do when they see someone like themselves. I've seen it in other ERGs that I participated and volunteered and brought college students onto company campus and share with them what it is we do. It's like, wow, that kind of connection. You're first generation, I'm first generation, I'm Peruvian, you're Peruvian. There's so that kind of connection and commonality that you have with the youth, with the younger generation, and share with them and show them the journey that you've had, that they can do that too. It's so inspiring and fulfilling as well, as I mentioned, but you're making that impact. And so I think companies should take advantage of that with the diverse talent that they do have within the companies to like further advocate for this purpose.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, that was the bookend plus one. So thank you so much for making the time. I totally appreciate you making the time, coming here, having this conversation. And I hope that everybody listening and watching this also gets a lot out of it. But again, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And I hope so too. I hope I was able to share and show my passion for this topic. I really enjoy it. And thanks for having me.
Indeed.